I got pretty stressed out last month on the project that I'm working on. And in this video, what I'm going to do is walk you through the reasons why I got very stressed out. And then I'm going to explain to you what it is that I did to get myself unstressed on that project. A couple of months ago, we essentially got together with the team, with the rest of the company's teams, and we did what is typically referred to as PI planning, where a lot of the stakeholders get together, they plan out what they expect to do over the next 3 months, and they put all of that stuff down on a plan together. Okay. And so the term PI planning here stands for program increment, if you didn't know what that meant, but that's essentially what we did. I'll get into the details of the plan in just 1 second. But during this planning session, I was one of over 200 people that came together, and we essentially drew up a plan on this whiteboard that you see here. And I essentially made a whole bunch of commitments on that plan for the analysis work that I'm going to be delivering over the next 90 days. And so I made those commitments. Those commitments are pretty firm. And at the time I made those commitments, I was told that I have a team of business analysts that I'm essentially leading through that analysis work. So overall, we were supposed to have a team of 4 people, including myself. So basically me and 3 other analysts were supposed to be executing on all of the work that I had committed to. What ended up happening a couple of weeks later is that we had my entire team essentially just fell apart, meaning that I was now responsible for still delivering on those same commitments, but with 75% less resources on my team. Essentially, everybody on my team just completely disbanded, and I'm now on the hook to deliver all of those deliverables by myself because I no longer have a team. So one of the BAs left at one point, and then a couple of days later, I realized that the rest of the BAs left, and then I had to take a couple of actions. This action here didn't work out, but then I had to take some additional remedial actions. And I'm still kind of working out through the fallout of a lot of this stuff. So it's not completely solved yet, but a lot of these actions that I've taken so far have helped. So let's turn this back around and go through the details. So PI planning, as I said earlier, stands for program increment planning. And the term PI is a term that comes out of the Safe Agile framework, essentially. And what this exercise is supposed to be is for large scale Agile projects, when you have a lot of stakeholders and you're trying to make a lot of changes to an organization all in a very condensed period of time, you have to get all of these people together to do what's called a program increment plan. Program increment is usually X number of months, but on this one, it is every increment that we have is about 3 months long. And every 3 months, we have to get together and do a plan to make sure that we're kind of moving through this program in lockstep, because a lot of the changes that we're making inside of the organization here are very interdependent. And so if I'm late with something that I'm supposed to do, that's going to affect somebody else downstream, and that's going to affect somebody else downstream. And it can essentially just hold the entire project back. And that's part of the reason why a lot of my deadlines are not flexible. So this isn't like a one-off project where I'm working on a small piece of software and the timelines are shiftable, essentially. On this program, the timelines are basically written in concrete. And so everything else can change, but those timelines will never change because there's so much other stuff that's dependent on those timelines. And you can see that just from the board itself. And again, I can't go through the details of this because this is client work, but I just want you to see the scope of what it looks like. So you won't be able to tell what's actually on the board. But from the scope of the board, my responsibility on this board essentially lies, if I had to zoom way in, my responsibility essentially lies across these different swim lanes right over here. Let me just outline these for you so that you can see. I own those 2 and I own these 2 work streams. Okay. And that is enough work for 4 business analysts to be executing all at the same time. So when I zoom back out, if you have 4 business analysts just doing those 4 different work streams, who's doing the rest of this project, right? Let's see how many other work streams there are in all other areas, such as sales, you have finance, you have IT, you have a whole bunch of other groups who are all getting together to do this PI planning, because every one of those divisions has some sort of a system or some sort of data that needs to be migrated or discarded or built anew essentially as part of this project. So again, these types of programs are significantly different than the one-off types of software projects that a lot of analysts can work on when they're implementing just one piece of software, right? Because this type of a program, again, just doing the planning on the size of a program took 200 people to get together on this whiteboard together to essentially come up with this plan in 2 weeks. So there was a 2 week planning window that we had to do this. So at the end of the planning session here, again, I owned those work streams. We had all the dependencies worked out. I'd assumed that I had 3 business analysts on that are helping me execute across those. And essentially what happens is that one day, one of the business analysts says, hey, can we have a quick call? And I say, sure, of course, right? We've been having some conversations around how I can get this person onboarded and kind of producing for the project. But just out of the blue, he says, can we have a quick call? And I say, sure, can you meet now? And we essentially just hopped on the call right after that. And this business analyst was the permanent employee, right, on my team, who the permanent employee business analyst who said, hey, look, I've just given notice to the company. I'm only here for another 2 weeks. And so that to me was a bit of a shock because I thought, oh my goodness, am I going to be able to get another business analyst on the team, or am I going to be able to do something like how am I going to make up for the fact that now I've lost 25% of my team, right? And so while I'm sitting there trying to figure that out, 2 days later, right? 2 days later, I found out that the other 2 business analysts are leaving my team. Okay. And so I don't have a message for the time when they notified me of this, but essentially here's the message of the person who is actually leaving the company. And so they're telling me, hey, look, I'm done on this date here. I can't do anything else for your project. And I said, okay, well, thank you for letting me know. Best of luck. And these 2 business analysts were actually consultants that we that had been hired under the project. And so I had no idea that they were only there for such a short, limited period of time. I was under the impression that I had all 3 of these resources the whole time, but essentially within a matter of 3 days, right, the entire business analysis team that I thought I had completely fell apart. The first thing that I did to try to resolve this issue, right, is that I sent an email to the BA manager who was managing all 3 of these resources. Okay, so me as a consultant, I'm not actually their manager. What I'm doing is playing a team lead role where I get resources from different managers, okay, and I kind of make up a team for myself so that I can lead that team through all of the analysis work. Luckily for me, all 3 of these business analysts came from the same BA manager. So I essentially wrote an email right away to that BA manager, right? The BA manager is this person. I copied 2 directors here, right? And I said, hey, look, our full-time person here informed me last week that he's provided notice to the company. I've also recently discovered that our consultants are only with us for another 6 weeks. And so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to deliver all of this work now that all of the business analysts that you had provided me are no longer going to be around. All right. And so I'm trying to essentially ask, hey, is there some sort of a plan to backfill these people so that you can give me a new business analyst that I can have on my team? I don't mind onboarding them all over again. That's perfectly fine. We'll go through that process again as long as I have a team to work with. And so the question I ask is there a plan for having continued BA support from your team for our work stream? And again, right, that work stream is just these two pieces that we see here, right? All of these other work streams have their own business analysts, they have their own architects, they have their own developers, and we have to kind of synchronize on a quarterly basis to make sure that we're all moving in lockstep. So I'm trying to just in that narrow little part of my world there, I'm trying to figure out how am I going to deliver my part, because I'm one analyst now and I got enough work for 4 analysts to do. What am I going to do? My first instinct was to write this email to the manager to say, are you backfilling these people to give me some new analysts that I can use to deliver essentially. So I said, knowing whether I have a BA team to help with the discovery requirements will feed into this is a typo here that should say replanning. I'll put an R here. to the replanning that I may need to do to make sure we can hit our planning commitments. Thank you. Long story short, there are no plans to backfill any of those business analysts that were gone anytime soon. I'm sure they're going to start to look for a replacement for the permanent business analyst eventually, but there's no immediate plans. Like they're not bringing in a new business analyst in right away. And the two consultants, when they're gone, there's no real position for them. So when they're gone, they're gone. They're not available for my team. And so now, by the end of all of this, I'm in a situation where I've committed to the scope. The timelines are immutable, meaning that the timelines are not going to change. Doesn't matter how much I kick or scream or raise concerns, right? Those timelines are not going to change just because of the interdependencies that exist between my work streams and all of the other work streams that exist in the program, right? These are all separate projects, right? This is my project, but each one of these is a separate project that has to run, and these projects are all interdependent with each other. So this project has interdependencies with that one, this one has interdependencies with that one, this one has interdependencies with ours, right? If I'm late on something, it's not just my own customers on my project that have to wait for the solution that we're trying to deliver. It impacts all of these other projects, right? And that's why in those types of situations, schedules are usually very tight and there is no room for error here. So I'm kind of stuck in a situation like that. So what I essentially did was I had to essentially just roll up my sleeves, start producing all of those deliverables myself. But for me to actually be able to do the work of 4 people as one business analyst, essentially what I had to do was to start to lighten my workload in other areas. So up until that point, I had been involved in a bunch of other tasks that I had to essentially just give to a different group of people. Okay. Those tasks were mostly around doing some pre-discovery and learning about some of the systems that are in there and actually going into the systems myself to figure out what kind of data is in there, etc. I essentially just grabbed that entire set of things that I was doing at the time and I gave it back to the technical folks and I said, hey, look, I need you guys to handle this because I got a bit of an emergency over here to handle this other thing. And I'm just going to come to the meetings and ask you guys questions instead of having to do all of that discovery work myself. And I need you guys to answer my questions. So I'm lightening up my workload by giving a big chunk of the work that I was doing to the team that really rightfully should be doing it. And so that created a little bit of extra space for me to actually dive in and start to do the detailed requirements that I needed to produce for on behalf of the other analysts. Second thing I did was to slim down my deliverables down to the absolute necessity. And so anything that was extra that I had planned to include into the documents were now stripped out. There were the way that I like to produce my deliverables oftentimes is I like to provide a lot of context. I like to show a lot of visual models that essentially depict the ideas that I'm trying to communicate. I often have narratives that kind of fill in the gaps so that when somebody's reading my requirements that they are kind of understanding the full picture in a bit of a sequential kind of story, right? Stripped all of that stuff out and I said, we're just getting down to the bare bone facts, right? Here are 5 things you need to build. If you have follow-up questions, please ask me later because I don't have those answers for you right now. So I'm essentially just trying to figure out how do I just slim down these deliverables as much as I possibly can while still producing something that is going to give the tech team what they need to actually start doing the architecture and the design work around a lot of the areas that I'm responsible for. So I'm just kind of just slimming everything down, boiling it down to absolute necessity. Even some things that I deem to be necessary now, I'm not actually putting into those documents. I'm just putting in a note to say, hey, when the time comes for us to get to this information, I'm going to circle back to this and I'm going to go and do the discovery and requirements on some of these other pieces. So I'm deferring even stuff that I think is critical. That's part of the bare bones. I'm cutting into the bones even just to kind of slim those deliverables down so I can deliver a meaningful set of deliverables essentially, even though they're not going to be the best quality deliverables that I've ever produced in my life. The third thing that I'm doing is that when I'm going into these status update meetings, I am not hiding the fact that I'm constantly behind the original plan and the fact that we're essentially just doing our best. We're still going to hit some of the deadlines. We're going to miss some of the deadlines, but not by a lot, essentially, because of all these two other things that I've been able to do here. I can reasonably make up for the work of the three other people because I have essentially taken these steps, and I do spend a little bit more time than I actually bill for just to keep things going along and making sure I can hit those deadlines, even though it's not necessarily my responsibility to backfill the team. I do want to make sure that I, to a reasonably good extent, hit those deadlines as much as I can, and I'll let things slip wherever I feel like they can afford to slip, essentially. So not a clean implementation at all, but this is this type of thing that as a senior analyst, you have to do to be able to deliver on a project under very tight timelines and under circumstances that are far, far, far less than ideal, essentially. And so this is happening on my current project. And again, I'm lucky that I've kind of gotten over the most of the fallout of that happening, but I'm not still in a completely safe territory because I am still running behind and I'm still trying to hit certain deadlines that I just don't think I will be able to. I'm just trying to do the best that I can to make sure I get close to those as possible. Some people who are waiting for things have to just wait a little bit longer, and unfortunately, there is no other answer to that question. All right, so hopefully this can kind of gives you a little bit of context of what it takes to be a business analyst lead. Oftentimes when you take on a lead position, you have a team of analysts, but sometimes your analysts can completely disappear. And if you don't have the ability to actually do the work that you're assigning to your team, you can't produce anything, essentially. There isn't that much value that you're providing. And so luckily enough, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know exactly what it is that I need my analysts to produce. And when they can't produce them, I have the ability to roll up my sleeves and step into the situation and produce those deliverables myself. Unfortunately, it does create a bit of a stressful situation. And, not going to lie, not just a bit of a stressful situation, a very stressful situation, especially when your timelines are not that flexible on a massive program where a lot of money is being spent to mobilize a lot of people. That creates a lot of pressure to make sure you can deliver. All right. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.